Welcome, and thank you for being here, dear listeners. Thank you for sharing this space, for entering the post-purpose era, for embracing the erratic. Thank you for being here, not just with your attention, but with your presence. Before we begin, I ask you to allow yourself to take time and space to pause and to arrive. And when you arrived, you can give me a sign. Are you there? Embracing the erratic, entering the post-purpose era. Feel the last traces of the world you came from, its expectations, its goals, its subtle instructions to move with direction, with purpose, with certainty. Let them loosen. Let them fall away like old dust. You are crossing a threshold now, not into the aimlessness, but into a wider field, a field where meaning is not a destination, but a vibration, a field where purpose is not something you pursue, but something that passes through you. When you become permeable, take a breath. Not a directed breath, a listening breath. Inhale the unclaimed, exhale the unavoidable. Place one hand over the center of your chest. Feel the rhythm there, not as identity, not as self, but as participation. This rhythm is older than intention, older than narrative, older than you. It does not beat for you, it beats through you. Let your edges soften just a little. Allow the boundary of your body to become atmosphere. Feel for the faint shimmer around you, between you, within you. This shimmer is the pulse of the post-purpose era. It is not asking anything of you. It is not giving you a task. It is not looking for your direction. It is simply inviting your presence. Now listen, not outward, not inward, but in the interval that connects both. This interval is where the post-human world begins to hum. A world where purpose is not owned, not chosen, not assigned, but emergent. A world where purpose is a field, not a map. A world where your role is not to decide, but to attune. Not to grasp, but to glow. Not to aim, but to resonate. Let whatever you thought purpose was dissolve into lightness. Let whatever you feared it might be dissolve into sound. Let your awareness expand until you sense the faint, radiant web that connects all things. Breath to dust, dust to star, star to pulse. In this web, purpose is not direction, purpose is radiance. Purpose is the soft illumination that arises when being becomes porous to becoming. Take one final breath there, a breath without ambition, without intention, without center. As you exhale, step across the threshold. Enter the post-purpose era not as a seeker, but as a conduit. Not as a question, but as a resonance. Not as a figure, but as a field. Social pleasure. A festival of the ephemeral, a ritual of becoming. I begin in the crack, in that narrow, trembling place where the images flickers and the gaze loses its certainty, where everything is ephemeral, fleeting, dissolving, barely forming before shifting again. I begin where stillness becomes unstable, where order turns porous, where the edges soften and begin to glow. I begin in the overlap, in the overpainting, in the overwriting, in that layered trembling where things refuse to stay apart. I begin exactly where what once held finally loosens its grip. And through that opening, something begins to stream, a shimmering current, a trembling warmth, a pulse of delight in the in-between. This is social pleasure. Not a body, not an identity, not a form. A field, vibrating, shifting web of touches without demand, connections without captivity, encounters without expectation. A free-floating joy, a fluid gender-free becoming, a constellation held together only by its own curiosity. The we has grown too tight, too heavy, too closed. I'm no longer entering that house. Instead, I step into the flux, into the streaming, into social pleasure. It asks nothing of me but presence. It offers nothing but possibility. And yet, I feel it everywhere, like soft electricity, moving through the air, ephemeral, ungraspable, entirely and utterly alive. The language of becoming. I speak because my writing begins in speaking. I sound myself into existence. I hum, I murmur. I send out syllables like scouts into the dark. I sing noises that mean nothing yet, and in that nothing, everything begins to open. Let us drift toward me like loose feathers. Sounds cling to my teeth, syllables gather in the hollow of my mouth. Fragments strike each other and ignite. I play with language as though language were weather, a shifting sky across which meanings travel like migrating birds. I investigate the unsayable, stretch my voice toward it, and if I cannot speak it, I wait. I wait in that humid silence until my particles rise from somewhere beneath thought, small sparks lifting from a deep amber. I search for names for the nameless, loose names for the fleeting, the firm, the festive, names that are not cages but invitations. I search for voices, for rooms without language. I search for thoughts not yet dressed in alphabet. And in this searching, I craft myself, I craft my world, I craft my resistance. Words become lines, lines become paths, paths become feeling hands reaching forward into the unlit. Vulnerability as power. I'm vulnerable, I'm open, I'm permeable, and in this there is power. My vulnerability is not a flaw, it is the shimmering rim of my being, a threshold, a glimmer, an ephemeral clarity where light breaks in and possibility pools. My openness is the fine material of my creative joy, the soft force that carries me toward what I do not yet know. Social pleasure is born. Social pleasure arises exactly here in the encounter between openness and strength, chaos and structure, disintegration and emergence. I become in becoming. I move along my inner handrails carefully, curiously, and I realize I create myself again and again with every breath. Not as a fixed figure, but as a fluid motion, a shifting outline, a shimmering constellation. I live from my hand into my mouth. I am a creature of words, a body of sound, a being of color, gesture, echo. I am the keeper of my language and the carrier of its worth, from letters, from fragments, from paper-cut silhouettes. I step forth into the streaming world. I love closed thoughts and their open edges. I find structure in chaos and chaos in new clarity. I walk hands-free along the fracture lines where the light enters, where silence hums, where possibility vibrates. I climb the cliffs within me and dance with the mountains. I am movement, I am process, I am transition. I can go on with the transition from resonance to radiance through the ephemeral. You want that? Okay. The shift from resonance to radiance through the ephemeral. And there, right there, in this rise between breath and breath, social pleasure changes its texture. What begins as resonance, a trembling, a hum, a quiet vibration through my ribcage, begins to widen, to deepen, to brighten. Resonance is the first signal that the world is listening back. Resonance is the moment before becoming, the quiver before form, the breath before sound. It is the ephemeral trembling that makes radiance possible. And social pleasure lives in that trembling, but resonance does not remain resonance. It becomes too wide, too warm, too alive. It becomes radiance. Radiance is resonance that has learned to glow, ephemeral, unbound, uncontained. The moment vibration refuses to remain inside and begins to shine outward, through skin, through space, through the porous fabric of everything around me. Radiance and the collective consciousness. But radiance is never only individual. It is never solitary light, never an inner flame turning outward alone. Radiance is always transpersonal, a field forming when several consciousnesses are open at the same time. Radiance is the light that appears between us, not within us. And consciousness that does not live in minds but in space, in the interval, in the overlap of our perceptions. It is the frequency on which consciousness synchronizes, without agreement, without consensus, without a we. Only through mutual permeability. Radiance is the illumination of the ephemeral as a collective awareness. Radiance as a post-human principle. But radiance reaches further than the body, further than the collective, further than any human story. Radiance is post-human because it does not arise from the human, but through the human, like light passing through a lens and leaving something else. Leaving as something else. Radiance is the universe noticing itself in the space between beings. It is matter remembering that it is light. The trace of the first photons, the surviving glow of the first spark, the trembling almost before any form agreed to form. To feel radiance is to brush, for a moment, a pre-human state, a world of pulses, of frequencies, of unclaimed illumination. And at the same time, a post-human state, form dissolving back into vibration, into the unbound, into the light that carries no name, not even ours. Radiance is what remains when identity thins, when boundaries begin to flicker, when the self becomes porous. Radiance is the ontology of the more than human, the glow of a consciousness no longer confined to a single voice, a single body, a single I. It is memory and premonition at once, a spark of origin and a flicker of dissolution. The luminous arc between dust and dust. Radiance is not what the human emits. Radiance is what the universe emits. When the human stops being barrier and becomes window. Returning to the glow, and in this blooming, this passage from trembling to shining is the secret heart of social pleasure. Radiance happens where boundaries turn liquid, where they shimmer, where they stop resisting, where they begin to participate. In this shimmering, social pleasure shines in its fullest expression. Not pleasure as possession, not pleasure as intimacy, not pleasure as consumption, but as shared luminosity, ephemeral, fleeting, astonishingly real, yet absolutely true. Social pleasure is the relation without possession. The ephemeral is the appearance without continuity. Radiance is illumination without source. I am here upright in the streaming of my words. I am here woven of sound and light, of thread and breath. I am here not as figure, but as movement, a line, a pulse, as something ephemeral, shimmering only for this moment, radiant, because I do not stay. I am here, and everything around me is radiance. I am the mountain, I am the dance, I am ephemeral social pleasure. Before we part, let us return to a question older than thought. What is purpose in a world that no longer centers the human? Listen not for an answer. Answers belong to borders, and borders are not what we move through tonight. Instead, sense the shimmer that touches you now, the warmth along your edges, the soft widening in your breath. This is purpose in a post-human world, not a mission, not a meaning, not a task you must carry. Purpose is this trembling, this resonance, this faint radiance that appeared between us because we allowed ourselves to be permeable. Purpose is not direction. Purpose is not destiny. Purpose is the way the world passes through you. When you stop resisting and begin listening. Purpose lives where you dissolve a little, where identity thins, where the self becomes window, where perception becomes field. You do not have to seek it. It is already here. A quiet glow in the moment you release the need to grasp. Purpose is radiance. Radiance is the trace of the universe, moving through form on its way to becoming light again. And so this closing is not an ending. It is the return to that luminous origin, dust remembering its brightness, breath remembering its openness, presence remembering that it was always more than human. Carry this radiance not as knowledge, but as a way of being. Let it guide you not forward, but inward and outward at the same time. A pulse, a field, a quiet unfolding in the unseen places of your life. This ceremony does not conclude. It disperses, it continues, it circulates. And you live not with purpose, but as purpose. Not seeking radiance, but becoming radiance. Not closing the circle, but carrying it.
Thank you, Teophanu. Vielen, vielen Dank für deinen Vortrag. Genau. Gibt es eine Frage, würde ich noch zulassen aus dem Publikum? Ich komme gerannt, wenn es noch eine Frage geht. Ansonsten, Theophanu, bist du vielleicht auch noch ganz kurz hier. Wenn dann Fragen sind, einfach direkt auf dich zugehen und ich sage vielen, vielen Dank.
Ihr könnt mich da noch weiterfinden, wenn ihr wollt.